Before life after loss, people would say, "How are you?" And I'd be like, "I'm good, thanks." And that would be true. But in life after loss, especially after my mom died, after my best friend died, I'm like, "I'm not good. I'm not fine. I'm not well. How are you?" Like, how do you answer that question? On the surface, it's very, very small. But when you actually think about the core of the question, how are you? What is the context of your life right now? That's a very big question that lots of people are casually lobbing in our direction when we are in the midst of grief. Hi there, Grief Growers, and welcome back to Grief Grower. I am so honored to be here with you once again, as always. If you've been growing alongside me in my work for a while, welcome back. And if you are new to me and my work, hello. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I am a grief coach, two-time, very, very, very soon to be three-time author, and the founder of Life After Loss Academy, which is an online grief support program that has helped dozens of grieving people stop feeling lost, stuck, broken, and alone, and start building lives that they genuinely love from the lives that loss forced them to live. All of the work I do includes not only death-related losses, which is what most people think of when they think about grief, but also divorce, major diagnosis, job loss, and any other major transition that changes your life. Here on the show and throughout all of my work, we believe that grief is not something to get over. It is something that we grow with and alongside for the rest of our lives, and that when we stop treating grief like a problem to be solved or like an inconvenience of our life and start treating grief like an invitation to live more deeply, we can create meaningful and rich lives that are full of the memories that we carry and the struggles that we faced and the preciousness of what it is to be alive right here and right now. Today on the show, I am answering one of the most common questions I get in life after loss, which is, how on earth do I respond to the dreaded question, how are you? But before we get into that, I wanted to let you know that there are still tickets available for the Grieftastic Book Fair taking place tomorrow in Los Angeles. So if you are an LA native, you've been waiting a little while to see what your schedule is going to be like, I would love to see you tomorrow, November 21st at the Lux Hotel. There is a VIP BFF brunch at the beginning where you can mix and mingle with other grievers, grief authors, grief professionals. And then from 12 to 4, there is an open book fair included with your ticket where you can listen to panels, watch panels, one of which I will be leading, get your book signed by authors who are present, including myself, and sort of meet all of these people who write about words and help people find the language to describe the loss experience. Myself and more than 40 grief authors, including Rachel Cargill, Rebecca Sofer, who we've had here on Grief Grower, David Kessler, Hope Edelman, and Jennifer Pasteloff, will be there, and you will walk away with my favorite souvenir of all time, a tote bag called a sad sack, full of all the grief books you purchased and had signed, as well as some really fun grief merch. That VIP brunch starts at 10 and goes to 11:30, and then the book fair happens from noon to 4. And as tickets still are available, you can use my code GRIEFBFF, GRIEF BFF, for 15% off until tickets sell out. So if you still see them available on the website, they are still available, and I would love to meet you there. The other thing that's happening very, very soon now on December 4th is a workshop I'm leading in partnership with Good Grief of Northwest Ohio, which is happening in Toledo on December 4th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. This is all about staying connected to a loved one who is dying through the holiday season and beyond. I am teaching parents and caregivers, people who are kind of anchors in families, how to use your five senses and to teach your kids and other family members to do the same, to recall positive memories of loved ones and build traditions around them so that you can go through the holiday season with your positive memories and the sparkly lights and the music that you love listening to and your grief hand in hand. It is an interactive workshop where I'm teaching a little bit, I'm answering your questions for a little bit, we're talking about and to each other about grief and loss throughout, and we will explore simple, meaningful ways to weave sense-based traditions into the holidays, and there are ways you can recycle this beyond the holidays for birthdays, death anniversaries, so on and so forth, so you can create lasting connections to the person who died for your entire family. You will learn how to use your five senses to call forward memories of loved ones that are positive and comforting, how to involve other members of your family, especially kids and teens, in creating positive grief-related traditions, what to do when painful memories or final memories of a loved one overshadow happy ones, how to tailor holiday traditions based on your energy levels. Some things are very low energy, such as looking through a scrapbook. Some things are very high energy, like everybody getting on a plane and flying together to Japan to honor a loved one who has died. That's very different energy levels, but they could be the traditions that work best for you in grief. And what to do when everyone in the family's needs differ. And you can find tickets for that at shelbyforsythia.com/events. That is also where you can find tickets, if they are still available, for the Grief-tastic Book Fair. And I will see you there tomorrow. Okay, today I am so honored to put together a list of 20 responses to the dreaded question of how are you? These are a combination of truthful responses, boundaried responses, and protective responses, because so many grievers just absolutely loathe hearing this question. But in our society, it's something that people say is a form of a greeting. I don't know why. I would love to know where this has come from, as a practice that we greet each other as people with how are you? Because that is a loaded question for everybody these days. And this was inspired by a note I received recently, a question inside Life After Loss Academy, which is my online course and community, from a student named Claire. And this is truly one of the most frequently shared dilemmas that I hear from anybody who's grieving anything: death, divorce, diagnosis, we call them the 3Ds, and so much more. She says, "Hi Shelby, I would appreciate your thoughts on something I keep encountering. When people I don't know very well, like work colleagues, greet me, they often say, 'How are you?' If I was being completely true and honest to myself at the moment, I would say, 'I'm broken, thanks, how are you?' But I don't want to reveal that to people I don't know or trust. I find myself saying, 'I'm okay, thanks, how are you?' It's a kind of compromise where I feel I'm not completely denying myself by saying, 'I'm fine,' when I'm not. But actually, I'm wondering if it's okay to say I'm fine to people who I don't want to share myself with and still respect my grief. Kind of like protecting it, where I get to choose who I reveal it to. Even saying, 'I'm okay, thanks,' seems to rub some people the wrong way. I guess what I'm asking is it okay to outright lie to others when they ask me how I am and say, 'Fine, thanks, how are you?' I don't want to go there with just anyone. I often don't want to go there with the people I do know and trust." And Claire, thank you so much for this question. This is so common in grief, but also so significant. So I have to let you know right out of the gate that you are not the only grieving person who is navigating this weird, invisible social tightrope of how are you? You are not alone in feeling sort of caught in the middle between how do I tell the truth about my grief, but also how do I guard the energy or protect the energy that it takes to reveal the truth about my grief to someone else who's asking the question. And what I have to say is this question, how are you, is one of the most frustrating and confusing parts of re-entering everyday life after loss. Before life after loss, people would say, "How are you?" And I'd be like, "I'm good, thanks." And that would be true. But in life after loss, especially after my mom died, after my best friend died, I'm like, "I'm not good. I'm not fine. I'm not well. How are you?" How do you answer that question? On the surface, it's very, very small. But when you actually think about the core of the question, how are you? What is the context of your life right now? That's a very big question that lots of people are casually lobbing in our direction when we are in the midst of grief. And if you are a grieving person, I imagine you are since you're listening to this podcast, it can feel like standing at this fork in the road every single time someone says, "How are you?" trying to decide, do I tell the truth? Do I say what's expected of me? "I'm fine, I'm well, how are you?" Do I protect my grief? Do I protect the other person from my grief? They may not know that's how you're going to respond, and then you have to deal with the fallout of their emotions, which is a whole other job for you to do. Do I even have the energy to explain what's happening inside of me right now and then respond however they're going to respond to it? And that unpredictability and dealing with, I'm not certain of how that's going to go. So on today's show, I want to break down whether it's okay to lie about how you actually are, plus some different ways that you might respond to the dreaded but frequent question, how are you? The first thing I want to say before I get into kind of the structure of the responses to how are you, because I have a whole lot of thoughts on the things you can say to respond to how are you, no surprise there, is yes, it's okay to lie and say you're fine when you're not. The long answer of that is what you say when you're grieving is your choice, and your grief belongs to you. I think something that a lot of grievers struggle with is I want to be authentic in my grief, but I also do not want to be exhausted all the time. And after a loss, there is a big difference between self-betrayal and self-protection. So when you say I'm fine to someone who has not demonstrated that they're a safe place for your grief, whether you just don't know whether or not they are, or they're very clearly not a safe place for your grief, this is not a betrayal of your heart or your loss or your loved one. This is a boundary for this person in this environment, I'm saying I'm fine. You do not have to let this person know that this is what you decided. You do not have to let your workplace know that this is what you decided. It is a boundary that you do not have to ever say out loud, but it's one that you can hold with yourself to protect your energy. And every time that somebody asks, how are you? You are under zero obligation to hand over your pain to them to hold and maybe drop for the sake of, quote, being truthful. In other words, and this is something that even I struggle with because authenticity is one of my greatest values, you do not have to be 100% honest with everyone 100% of the time. I'll say that again. If you are grieving a significant loss and you do not know how to answer the question, how are you? You may need to hear that you do not have to be 100% honest with everyone 100% of the time. You do not have to perform emotional transparency, vulnerability, for the comfort or the benefit of others. And you don't have to decide in the moment whether you're doing it right. Simply put, your grief is sacred and you get to choose who you share it with. So instead of asking, is it okay to lie? I invite you to reframe this. Potentially asking yourself, what kind of truth do I have the energy to share right now? And what kind of connection do I want or not want with the person who's asking the question? And so to support you in making that choice or in answering those questions, I have created this 4-part spectrum of responses to how are you, which can be really helpful when you're grieving. Think of these not as scripts to memorize. You don't have to keep them in your pocket, but you can if you want. You can keep this episode and play it over and over again. But these are also options that you can reach for depending on the context of the person you're speaking with, your capacity, because that's changing day to day when you're grieving, and who is the person asking the question. So let's begin with kind of the deepest end of the spectrum. This is where it feels safest to tell the truth. So number 1 is full truth invitations for when you want to be open and the person asking feels safe. Both of these things are true. So these scripted responses are honest and layered and emotionally vulnerable. They signal to the other person, yes, I want to go there with you. I actually want to tell you how I am, and I'm inviting you to come with me. And use these with people who you trust deeply. They're already sort of on your team from a grief perspective, or people who you know are explicitly asking about your loss with care and who have the capacity to hear it. They say, how are you? You could say, I have a long, complex answer to that question. Do you have space to hear it? Or you could say, the truth is, I am having a insert loss here day to day. I'm having a dead mom day. I'm having a divorce day. I'm having a chronic illness day, whatever it is for you. Would you like to talk about it? You could say, my grief feels very close to the surface today. You could also say, I am a mix of tender, tired, and surprisingly okay. Want to hear more about each of those things. And the cool thing about these responses, these full truth invitations, they don't assume that the other person can hold your grief, but they ask them, they invite them into conversation about it if they're willing to go there with you. So you are using your response to how are you as a door opener to go deeper. Number 2 on this spectrum is what I call honest but boundaried. So this is, I want to tell the truth, but I don't want to stay there long. I can't get into it with you whether I don't have the time, you don't have the time, we're at work, whatever the case may be. So each of these responses acknowledges your reality without requiring much further conversation. They are perfect for acquaintances and colleagues. So Claire, if you're listening, this is for you. Or you can even use this with friends when you do not have the bandwidth or the capacity for deeper connection. So this is especially relevant as we're going into the holiday season. But if you're approaching a grief anniversary, if some other milestone is happening or you're working on a big project or there's some kind of other stress in your life and you're I can't get into it, but I do want to tell you the truth. So they say, how are you? And you could say, not the greatest, but I know I won't feel this way forever. You could say, heavy, but I'm still standing. You could say, I've been having some dark days lately, but I appreciate you asking. You could say, not so hot, but I'm hoping things will change. You could say, some days are harder than others. Today is one of them. You could say, sad, but also kind of okay in moments. Or you could say overwhelmed, but thanks for checking in. That really means a lot. And these are lovely because they are truthful, but they don't necessarily invite the other person to ask more questions or to be in deeper conversation with you. They are honest, but not revealing. And you don't pretend, but you also don't overextend yourself. One of my students called this being emotionally hungover, when you tell too much of your grief story to a person who was not ready to receive it, or you just feel emotionally depleted for sharing too much in a given time. And the thing I like about these responses is there's a very clear period on the end of all of them, which will signal for most people in conversation not to pry further or ask further questions beyond the initial how are you. All right, let's get to section 3, and this is minimal disclosure. So this is, I'm not up for being 100% real, but I still want to answer your question. Like, I still want to stay polite and acknowledge that you have asked something of me. So I'm giving you a little bit of something. It's not hardly all, as my wife would say, all of the everything. So these responses are intended to make a quick exit. They hold the door open for like this much truth, like a little teeny bit, but they close the door to further emotional labor on your part and also the part of the person asking. They are useful for neutral spaces or passing conversations, like you are literally passing each other in the hallway, or when you're emotionally tapped out. Somebody says, "How are you?" You could say, "I'm still upright and breathing. What about you?" You could say, "I'm getting through it." You could say, "Doing my best today, and that's all I can ask for," right? You could say, "Surviving, all things considered, thanks." You could say, "I'm putting one foot in front of the other, just like you." You could say, "Getting by as best I can, how about you?" And these are not lies. These are not outright false, "I'm great, thanks," with like a thumbs up emoji. But they are lightweight placeholders for what is actually happening internally for you. And when somebody says, "How are you?" especially if they are not a close acquaintance or somebody who is in your orbit regularly, you do not owe them more than that. And in this, the year of our Lord 2025, I could ask anybody, "How are you?" And if I heard a response, "Surviving, all things considered, thanks," I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't need to ask further questions. Everyone's kind of living that life right now. And I imagine, or I hope, that the same would be true for you. I'm putting one foot or the other. I'm getting by as best I can. Yeah, ain't we all? That feels like a very fitting and shallow but honest response to any "how are you" that gets tossed in your direction. The last category here is zero disclosure. And this is also what I'm calling AKA grief mask on. A lot of people talk about, I feel like I wear a mask all day when I'm grieving to perform being fine and good. My friend Stephanie Zamora calls it fine and good. In order to get through the day, in order to be a person in society as we have constructed it, is like I have to put a grief mask on. So these are responses for when the answer to "how are you" is nobody's business but your own. This is the category that Claire asked about in her initial question, the one that sometimes gets labeled as dishonest, but it is, from my perspective, a powerful form of protection in grief. These responses are total social camouflage, aka wearing the grief mask, hiding truth behind "I'm fine." And that's okay if you need it, or when the situation calls for it. It's unsafe to share your grief story. This person has proven that they are not a stable place to hold or support your grief story. They could potentially hold it against you. You simply don't have the time, or you are like absolutely energetically burned out, or it's just like somebody's asking in passing conversation and you can tell they don't care. "How are you?" "I'm fine, thanks. How are you?" "How are you?" "Doing all right, thanks." "How are you today?" "I'm good. What's life like in your world?" "How are you?" "All's well with me. How's your week going?" These may feel like lies to you, but if you flip the script of that, they can also be self-protecting to you. What these responses give you is the gift of not having to get into your grief with a person who may or may not be a safe or comfortable place for it. Sometimes, as I said at the top of the show, the people who ask "how are you" are not really asking at all. They do not care about your answer. It is just a greeting. It is a formality, is a societal reflex. It is a way we have been taught, I don't know why, I should have done the research into this, to say hello to each other. It is another way of saying, "Hi, I acknowledge your presence. How are you?" I don't know why those two things got conflated. I need to do some, I need to find out why, because that will bother me. But it's one of these things where it's like, sometimes, even though you may feel a pressure or a compulsion to be perfectly honest, or to like yell in people's faces, "I am not okay, and I wish somebody could see that," it's not always appropriate or protective of your heart or your energy to do so. So when your grief feels too sacred or your surroundings feel too risky, it is completely valid to opt out of emotional exposure and to let yourself hide behind the mask of "I'm fine, how are you?" You are not lying, you are not betraying your loved one or your loss, and you are not abandoning yourself in your grief. You are actually choosing yourself in your grief, in addition to choosing safety and discernment in that one single interaction. And if it still feels like lying to you, and I totally hear you if it does, if it helps you feel better, what I want you to remind yourself of is who is actually in your corner in grief. Who can you be honest and truthful with? And who can you reassure yourself that you will be honest and truthful with and vulnerable with, just not right now? In Life After Loss Academy, we talk about making a list of your grief allies. These are people you know for sure can hold space for your grief. And so in your mind, when one of your coworkers says, "How are you?" and you say, "Fine, thanks, how are you?" you might think, "How are you?" is a question for my grief ally, Gail, who I'll talk to later. Not for Howard, my coworker. That's not a question I answer when it comes from Howard. That's a question I answer when it comes from Gail, because I know Gail has the space to hold my grief. Sorry, Howard. But it's one of these things where it's like, as you answer the question with a mask of "I'm fine," or "I'm well, how are you?" or "I'm doing all right," or "Good, how about you?" you do not have to descend into the guilt or the shame spiral of "I am a liar" in my grief. You can say, "I am self-protecting my grief with this person, or in this scenario, or in this situation, or today, or for the time being," and say, "I am vulnerable," or "I will answer that question with this person, or this friend, or this family member, or in this grief support group." I have other places where the real answer to that question goes, even if it's just to myself and a journal that I keep, or a voice memo that I take, or a regular ritual that I do to communicate with loved ones who have died. There are other places and other people who do have the space and capacity to hold that question. So it's not lying, it's protecting. And the thing I want to impart on you before we say goodbye in this episode is that you do not owe everybody the truth about your grief. When I first started writing this episode, I wrote, "You do not owe anybody the truth about your grief," but I think that's a lie. I think you owe yourself the truth of your grief. I think you owe any professional you seek support from the truth about your grief. I'm thinking medical professionals, grief professionals, spiritual directors, anybody who you seek help from about your grief. And there are people you have losses in common with that often deserve, and have shown that they deserve, the truth about your grief, at least the bits you'd like to show them. I know for friends and family members and things like that, there are parts of grief that you prefer to keep to yourself. But the thing that you do owe is to yourself, and that is an immense amount of compassion when you're grieving. So to Claire, who asked this question, and to anybody else who's struggling with this question of what on earth do I say in response to "How are you?" in grief? Yeah, it's okay to say "I'm fine" when you're not. Your grief is not a public performance that others are just allowed unfettered 24/7 access to. Your grief is a part of your lived reality. You're the one who has to live inside it. And you can place a compassionate fence around it when it feels necessary to do so. And sometimes the compassionate fence, or like the electrified fence that people bounce off of, is "I'm fine. I'm good. Doing well. How are you?" Part of that compassionate fence placing involves using your words to invite some people in. "I'm having a rough go of it lately. Do you want to hear more? Do you have space to hear more?" And to keep other people out. "Good, thanks. Thanks for asking." What I want you to know is that you are the ultimate protector of your heart and of your grief. And you are more than allowed to do what you need to do in each moment to survive each interaction with each new person, or each same person if they're in your life a lot, and each day with grief in tow. If you want more tools and scripts like this, I hope you'll join us inside Life After Loss Academy. Inside that program and community, we dive very, very deep into how to protect your grief in social settings. There is an entire module called the Establish module, where we establish our terms of engagement in relationships with other people. So I will teach you how to protect your grief in social settings and move through relationships with friends, family, and coworkers as a grieving person. You will gain the tools to set kind but firm boundaries, communicate your needs, and find your footing in a world that has changed because of loss. You can learn more and join us at the link in the show notes. And I will say, if you're listening to the show and you're supporting somebody grieving, most grievers are also supporting someone else who is grieving, but you don't know what to say to check in with them other than "How are you?" if that's your default mode, because society has made it so many of our default modes. I encourage you to check out my book, Of Course I'm Here Right Now. And this is the book of mine that is coming out in March, my soon-to-be 3-time author book. Of Course I'm Here Right Now. It is a book entirely about what to say to support someone who's grieving. So this is not bring a casserole, mow their lawn, offer to pet sit. Those are all actions related to supporting someone grieving. These are words, entirely words, beyond "Sorry for your loss, my condolences, you have our sympathy." This is the actual in the dirt, in the relationship words that you use to talk to somebody who is grieving, and to comfort someone who's grieving, and to support someone who's grieving in your life. In the book, you will find dozens and dozens of practical scripts, just like this episode today, to support someone grieving, both immediately after a loss, like the loss happened yesterday, and also years down the road. And the benefit of this, and the thing that I am really driving home in this book is the power of words to strengthen our relationship in grief. So many of our relationships after losses are broken or fractured or made awkward or disappear entirely because someone said something hurtful or someone heard or received something as hurtful because it was a platitude or a cliche or not what they needed to hear in this moment. And I believe the opposite is also true, that words can strengthen our relationships, and that when we have the words to say, when we know how to comfort grieving people with language alone, text, email, phone call, FaceTime, Zoom, all the ways we connect now, it changes how we engage with each other, and it makes it so that our relationships get stronger when the worst things happen. And that is what I want for all of us. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today. I would love to hear your thoughts. How do you respond to when somebody asks, how are you in the midst of grief? And you can find contact information to me or to submit a question of your own for an Ask Shelby episode at the link in the show notes. That's all for this episode of Grief Grower. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're looking for grief support beyond this show, you can find free workshops, blog articles, and my signature What's Your Grief Support Style quiz at shelbyforsythia.com/links. And if you'd like to get support from me for your unique loss experience, you can always join us in Life After Loss Academy, my online course and community. I will walk you through my 5-step grief framework, GRIEF, for rebuilding after loss, and you can get live coaching from me every single week to answer your questions, like this one from Claire. Replays are always available if you can't attend live. It is just $33 a month to join, or $22 a month if you're a marginalized or financially stressed griever, no questions asked, and you can cancel at any time. If this podcast felt validating, comforting, educational, or helpful to you, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and be sure to share Grief Grower with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is going through. Grief Grower is hosted by yours truly, Shelby Forsythia, and the theme music is by Addie Goldstein. Until next time, Grief Growers, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world, and I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.